I'm privileged today to host this event with Arin Peter, who's the early talent director at Microsoft. So before we transfer to Arin, uh, our upcoming event. So in February, our next event is Who's and Brews February meeting. So it's going to be at 7 p.m. Wednesday, February the 22nd. It's actually a brewery in the Seattle area. So you're more than welcome to come and join us in person. So Arin Peter, today's presenter, is the Director of Finance, Early Talent, and Business Management at Microsoft. Before she joined Microsoft, she was working at LinkedIn for a few years and had extensive experience in LinkedIn profile and online, like just recruiting. So with that said, I'll pass it over to Arin. Arin, thank you.
Of course, and thanks for having me. I'm happy to be back. We got to do this event or a similar one about a year ago, and so it feels like it's the right time again. Of course, last year's spirit might have felt a little bit new year, new job spirit. I think this spirit feels a little bit new year, challenging times, just kind of how to navigate that. And so that's the conversation we're having today. I want to make sure everyone can hear me okay, see me okay. Presentation looks good. Okay. And we'll try to monitor the chat too as things come in. Perfect. I got a couple of thumbs up, so that always helps. Well, it is a pleasure to be here, fellow Who for life, and I definitely miss the Charlottesville area, especially being in Seattle now. It feels so far away physically, and so moments like this make it really special just to reconnect. So today is all about what we'll call leveling up your LinkedIn. So both talking about the value of LinkedIn and how to build your brand on LinkedIn, but also how to use LinkedIn for job seeking. So hopefully you'll learn something new today, whether you have been a LinkedIn fan for years or whether you just recently built a profile. I hope that I can commit to you learning something new and different to just make this as productive as possible. So let's start a little bit of the value of LinkedIn. And as Hongwu mentioned, I came from LinkedIn before being at Microsoft. So I'll just share a little more about my background and why I'm such a power LinkedIn fan. So on the next slide, a little bit more about me. You heard, yes, from a job standpoint, I've had some big tech experience, both at Microsoft and LinkedIn, but I started right after UVA at Deloitte in what was called human capital consulting. And so human capital consulting was all about how to help big companies think about their people or talent strategies. And so I just feel like I've been at this intersection of kind of tech and people for a while. And I feel really lucky having kind of found that and been in that space. So the types of roles that I've worn in these big tech or consulting companies usually partner with recruiting teams, usually are focused around learning and development, trying to help students, so people coming from UVA or equivalent. I promise to have time for questions and to make this engaging. Perfect. Okay, so that's a little bit on the work front, but on the personal front, I mentioned missing Charlottesville, and that's because I've been a West Coast convert, if you will. So I grew up right outside of the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. I grew up on the Maryland side in Rockville, for anyone who's still over there. And then I've moved to the West Coast, starting first in San Francisco and second to the Seattle area. Outside of work, you will find me obsessed with my dog. She might make an appearance at some time. You'll also catch me as a future human mom because I'm 7.5 months pregnant today. So I hope that I'm here the whole time, but it's very exciting and a little overwhelming. I teach dance fitness classes and I love staying active. So if anyone has favorite Peloton instructors, we can always relate over that too. But let me go back to a little bit about LinkedIn and hopefully why you see some value in building your profile using LinkedIn as a great recruiting tool for you, or a great platform for you. So a little fun fact. So 9 out of 10 employers use LinkedIn today, right? And so the reason then why having a presence on LinkedIn matters for us as individuals is because it's going to be a place we see a high volume of jobs, a high volume of recruiting activity. And so I always recommend you putting yourself out there on LinkedIn just to keep as many options open to you as possible. If we go one more, Before we talk about kind of what you do on LinkedIn and all of the different terms that are on LinkedIn, I just want to pause and just make sure we're all in kind of the same playing field. So when we talk about a workforce, these are the people that exist either in a location that LinkedIn is trying to create opportunity for. And LinkedIn's whole vision statement is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. And so the LinkedIn experiences we might see, we're probably going to see an experience that's more about the United States. And then more granularly, we might see workforces that are more where the geographies or the industries that we exist in. You might see more content pushed to you based off of what LinkedIn thinks is the workforce you're in. So that could be location specific, industry specific. And that's why your experience might look a little different on LinkedIn than someone else's experience. Connections is another big term we'll talk about. Think of connections as all the people you know on LinkedIn. And we'll go deeper on this, but connections are first, second, or third degree. A first degree connection is someone that you've connected with or they've connected with you. And it's like you're inviting them in, right, to your profile. Think of them as the people on your phone, the contacts that you have. Those are your first degree connections. Your second degree connections are going to be the people that they know. So the people that your first degree are connected to. And usually the power of networking tends to lie in the second degree connections. And then third degree connections are all the people your second degree network knows. Largely, the experience you see on LinkedIn is going to be driven by your first and second degree connections. So LinkedIn wants to push content to you that they think is relevant to you. So content that is posted by people you've connected with or people that they're connected to. And that just helps your experience on LinkedIn hopefully be, again, as just relevant as possible. When we talk about a network, that's a group of connected people. That's kind of where I was alluding to. Often the power of networking or the power of networks lies in the second degree connections. So it might not be because I know Hongwoo that I get my next opportunity, but it could be I know Hongwoo knows Eric, and Eric's company has an incredible opportunity for me, and Hongwoo helps make that connection.
Beautiful down
and then
here.
referrals refer to any time like you're looking for a formal introduction into a job or something like that. And so referrals on LinkedIn, you can actually take action to request referrals. You can have people write recommendations for you. But I'm going to focus much more on like how do you build your connections in a network to get you the type of opportunities that excite you. All right, so a couple of the terms I just wanted before we dive in. So why would I show up on LinkedIn? The reason we're going to show up on LinkedIn is just like any company has their own company page and has a brand that they stand for. LinkedIn is our opportunity to build our page and to put our brand forward. So think about LinkedIn as the place to tell your story, the place to show who you are, what you care about, what your values are. And what's really great about having a LinkedIn profile as opposed to solely a resume to do this is that your LinkedIn profile can evolve. It can be much more dynamic, can include a lot of rich media that we'll talk about. You still want to have, of course, a resume or a CV and probably multiple versions of resumes that you keep updated. But usually you're going to use a resume or a CV to apply for a specific job at a specific time. LinkedIn is this ever-evolving place to tell your story to employers at all different times, or to companies at all different times, to potential customers or peers, right, at all different times. And so that's why you want that LinkedIn profile to be as dynamic as possible. So let's talk deeper about the profile. And then after this section, I'm going to pause just to see what kind of questions have come in. So I alluded to there's some differences between your profile and your resume. Both are super important to have. I'm going to focus much more on tips for your LinkedIn profile today. And so just to reiterate, when you think about a profile, it's going to speak to a wide variety of employers, customers, colleagues, all at any given time. You can get super dynamic and go into a lot of detail. with projects or skills. You can put certifications on there. You can incorporate video, articles you've published. Think about this again as that really rich media way to tell your story. It allows you to connect with a ton of people. Some people you're connected with today as first degree connections, or people you want to be adding into your connections and into your network. And then you can request recommendations or endorsements that can be visible to anyone on LinkedIn. Before we go deeper, my next slide just shows you, in case you're one of those participants who's like, I want to be working on my profile at the same time as you're giving me all these tips, you can totally do that. So you are welcome to multitask today. I know we are recording this and we can share this content too, but if you're someone who learns a lot more by doing at the same time, please feel free to open up LinkedIn either on the app on your phone or into a different tab on your browser. And to get to your edit page, just in case you want to be doing anything real time, you'll click on the me icon in the top right corner and you'll hit view profile. And you should hopefully see this pencil icon in the top right section on your profile, exactly where Hangwoo is pointing, where you can edit things, right? You can edit your picture, your bio. There's two different pictures we'll talk about. There's the picture that's you, and then there's the background or cover picture, which you can make to reflect either the company that you work at today. You can also make that to reflect other things you care about. LinkedIn actually has a lot of drop-down options there that could say things like, standing for justice, or as we're entering Black History Month, there could be backgrounds there just to show things that you're passionate about and you want to show support for. You could also put a picture of UVA. Talk about a beautiful campus to put on your background, or a picture of maybe the city that you live in, as a couple of ideas. But I'm going to focus much more on the key tips that you really want to customize, whereas I think of that background image as a nice to have. So the absolute first thing you want to do, you want to have a photo. I know photos can make some of us uncomfortable, or we're like, why do I have to have a photo? But having a picture, the data shows you're going to receive more views and more connection requests. And the real reason for that is because people that know when they see you on LinkedIn that there's a human behind that profile, as opposed to someone who's not as active, or someone who maybe they can't distinguish, like, is this the Arin that I was looking for? Is this the Hangwoo I was looking for? A photo really makes it so that people know you're present and hopefully you're active on LinkedIn. And so just a couple of tips here. You want a background, right, that's not too distracting. It is totally okay to take it selfie status in a place like in your home or your place of work, like against a relatively blank wall. Think about whatever attire makes sense for you, right, for the jobs that you're looking for. LinkedIn is not meant to be an overly stuffy place of a bunch of people in suits. If you have a job and you like wearing a suit at your job, go ahead and wear it. But you can also be much more just yourself and dressing for the jobs that you want. We recommend having just a friendly, natural expression, and then that you make up the majority of the picture or the frame. So a couple of just photo tips and a really, really strong recommend on having a picture. The second thing that is so important is having a headline. And this is where I see a lot of people only copy their job title as their headline, as opposed to remembering the headline is meant to describe more than the job you have today. It's meant to show a little bit of who you are and what you care about. And these questions, I think, really help me when I'm writing a headline, right? If this is the only thing, the only, 7 to 10 words someone's going to see about me next to my name and my picture, what do those 7 to 10 words say about me? And also, how or why could that headline distinguish me when perhaps other recruiters or people are looking at me? So thank you to Hangwoo and Tilden for volunteering right before this on pulling up their pictures and their headlines here, just so you can see a little bit of a range. So for Hangwoo, he focuses more on the role that he has at Microsoft. You'll also see here he's customized that background. He's got the photo that really matches kind of the expression that we were talking about and takes him up. But he might want to customize that headline to have one more step about other things he cares about. right? And for example, I don't know if Hongwoo, you want to come off and share like one or two other things about you. Don't mean to put you on the spot. You tell me if you're comfortable, because we can always brainstorm your headline aloud.
Yeah, I feel like uh, this is actually more of a question like, what are some of the other things that's appropriate to put on a
Yeah.
headline? For example, I can say I'm a avid drinker. That's probably not appropriate.
Yeah, I mean,
So
you could say beer connoisseur maybe, or beer lover, and you might get some interesting conversation or interesting connection requests. But you know, I love that you asked that, because you want your headline to be a hook, right, for people to make a conversation with you. And so whatever might be a passion that you have or something that you'd want to start a conversation around, like that's how I think about headlines. So like for me, I will talk all day about dance fitness and being a dog mom, outside of also talking about my day job. And so the way that I distinguish that is I put this line break in my headline, and it kind of invites people, right, to have conversations with me. And it's a really great way to show this kind of personal reach out, and for maybe to bond with someone who we have a shared hobby or shared interest. Because usually when you find commonality with someone, the conversations can become a little bit easier. You can get into a little bit more of the, you know, the professional conversation you want to have. But if someone just reaches out, saw that you work at Microsoft, can we talk? I might not be as inclined to respond or have a deeper conversation. But if someone says, oh, I'm a dog parent too, you know, what kind of dog do you have? I'm also really curious about what you do at Microsoft. I am instantly more likely to probably respond to that, because I can sense that person's trying to make a human connection with me. So if there's other beer connoisseurs, you know, you got something to bond with Hongwoo over. The next piece, because these are the three most important keys. Like if you take nothing away from today, please take away that the most important things on your profile are your picture, your headline, and your summary. And the reason those are the most important is because I'm not even going to begin scrolling down your profile unless I'm hooked in and see a more complete profile. So when you search for someone, the first things you see, again, next to their name, are that picture and headline. And then you see the summary section. Everything else below, I have to be scrolling in your profile to see. So I need to have some kind of a hook, right, or a reason where I'd want to do that. And so that's why having this about or summary section is really important. I love writing these summary sections because I also think it's a great way to just challenge myself and how would I tell my own story. So many of us, if we're actively interviewing, or if we can put ourselves in those interviewing shoes, you're often asked something like, tell me about yourself. Think about your summary as your answer to tell me about yourself. And so you want a format that looks like this is kind of what we'd recommend. You know, a couple sentences on who you are, a few sentences that go deeper on the experience that you have that's really relevant from a work or professional standpoint, and then one or two sentences that are forward-looking. And two other tips, we do encourage you write in the first person. It's not required by any means, but the first person can just really help from humanizing, again, your profile and your voice. A tip that not many people know is your summary also has to be at least 40 words, 40, for you to show up more actively in search results. So you want to have a summary that shows, again, a little bit more completion behind it. And so 40 words is that magic word count. And so you'll see here, Hongwoo and I write ours a little differently. It's not about one being better or worse than the other. There's just different ways to describe ourselves. And so Hongwoo focuses a little bit more about this being an experienced strategist, passionate about technology, software licensing, business model innovation, and process optimization. What I love about that is you start broad, right? And you focus more on like who you are, not just the job title that you hold. What he might do a little more of next is perhaps add a few sentences that are more about the jobs or the industries he's worked in. But this is such a great way to start and to open because it's broader about who he is. And then he does talk about some of the skills that he has. And it's great he puts a lot of the skills here because back to when people are searching for you, whether a recruiter or just anyone who could be looking for you, they're going to search in the search bar, and certain keywords are going to matter on their search. So when you write skills out, or when some of the words in your bio maybe relate with words that you see on jobs that excite you, right, that you see in the job description, then you might show up as a higher likely candidate for whatever that recruiter is searching for or screening for. So you could write your skills out like this, or you could find an approach to put those skills a little bit more into a sentence format, which is a little bit of the approach that I take. So I start high level, like how do I, define myself? And I know this might be hard to read for some of us, but again, you can search on any of our profiles after. And then I talk about what my job is today, some of the experiences I've held. And I do that both in a paragraph about Microsoft and then a before Microsoft, what I've done. I like to end with how I want people to engage with me, and how I want them to engage with me. You'll see here, I kind of end back with that outside of my day job, what you'll find me doing or what you find me caring about. And that's because today I'm not in an active place where I'm seeking or actively looking for jobs. I really want to engage with people who have shared interests, who have shared hobbies, who are curious about the kind of early career work that we do at Microsoft, or are curious about more recruiting trends. That's where I really want the conversations to go. If you are in a place where you're actively job seeking, you should end or put here, open to new roles, please reach out to me. And you can also go a step further. You could include your email if you'd like. It's totally a personal preference. Or you could even include a copy of your resume here as well. Because at the end of your About section, you can also upload documents. So if you want to proactively put there a resume or an email, that is all personal choice. And I really recommend ending, again, with that forward-looking way of how do you want people to connect with you. So I'm going to pause before we go to kind of the rest of your profile section, because I really believe these are the three most important sections. Again, that picture, that headline, and that summary just show you have a much more complete profile. The rest I have to have been hooked in to keep scrolling. And so I see one question here that came in on, does it help to list every possible skill, or is it better to make the list specific in a quick read? I think it's a great question, Jeff. The good news is you'll have a later on section in your profile that is called skills. And when recruiters search, it will search any part of your profile, pulling in different keywords. So it's a little personal preference. For me, I would probably focus on the skills that relate to the jobs I want, or the jobs like I'm most curious about having. That's where I would focus anything in my summary section. Because in your later on in your profile, your skills section, you can have, I think, up to 35 different skills listed there. So I'd probably think like, what are the, 5 is always the magic number, the 5 skills or so that I think most connect with the jobs that I want to have or that I'm looking for. And again, you can do them format wise. Some of us might prefer how Hangwoo has it. Format wise, some of us might want to write it a little bit more kind of in this conversational manner. I also came from a communications background. And so for me, I like writing things out that way. Oh, perfect. There's, profiles in here. Thank you, Tilden, for putting those, because I realize this is probably a little smaller on the screen for many. And then here we go for Ted. For non-premium new members, how long can they try to connect with third-degree members? Oh, okay, good question. I don't know if there's kind of like a time so much, but I do know like you have a certain amount of in-mails that you can send, and usually you get in-mail credit back from someone if they connect with you. And the reason LinkedIn does that is we don't want people just mass connecting with individuals that they don't know, right? Because then it can kind of dilute the experience. It can feel like, is this a robot that's connecting with me versus another person? And so usually for non-premium members, you'll have a certain amount of in-mail credits, and we'll talk in a few slides about how to personalize in-mail and how to have a reach out that hopefully has like the highest likelihood of getting a response back. But as you get responses back, your in-mail credit should come back to you. So I hope that's answering that question. If not, we can talk more in kind of our and the direct message around that. Cool. All right, well, let me get to a couple more things in profile, because then I do really want to focus on, like, how do I build a network, and a network that helps me get the jobs and the connections that I'm looking for. So we just spoke about those 3 most important keys of picture, headline, summary. The rest is actually what's most translatable from your resume or CV to bring over onto LinkedIn. So this next section is work experience. And so here's where you could potentially be copying and pasting some of the similar bullet points that you might have on a resume. I still recommend writing this section in the first person. Again, I think of LinkedIn as just a little more of a conversational way to talk about my work, as opposed to list every accomplishment that I might have done. What I love about LinkedIn too is you can start adding that rich media here. So think about photos or links that are relatable to your job. So for this, at my job at LinkedIn, a large part is hiring university students, or attracting people from universities to think, ooh, Microsoft's a great place for me to work. And in particular, Microsoft Finance is a great place for me. And so these 2 pictures at the bottom actually take people to links to learn more about internships or student job opportunities at Microsoft. And it just also shows, again, this kind of photo and this media that makes my experience just visually look as appealing as possible. Again, I keep it conversational. I usually think a couple sentences about the role, and it's your choice if you want to pull in bullet points, but this is probably going to be the most relatable to what would be on your resume or your CV to pull it onto your LinkedIn profile. Then after your work experience, as we keep scrolling down, you're going to see your volunteer experience. I strongly recommend you include volunteer experience. As you'll see here, again, just the more complete your profile is, the more views that you tend to get. So those with volunteer experience get 6 times more profile views. I keep it pretty light, a couple sentences either about the organization or what my role has looked like. And again, it can just be that hook to connect with people on. And you never know where those shared or common interests could lead from a great conversation or a great opportunity. And then lastly goes to that skills and endorsements on your profile, which we were talking about a little bit earlier. You want to have skills on your profile because, again, data shows you'll start to receive more views, you'll show up higher in search results. For some of our more technical skills, there's even skills quizzes or assessments that you can take that can give you badges or show some sort of a, Diane is demonstrated blank type of competency. And so there's ways you can take assessments or take quizzes here. Some of us also don't know, you can choose the order that your skills are displayed. And you would do that again with this pencil icon, where you can drag and drop how you might want your skills to show up based off of, again, the jobs that you're most interested in or looking for. If you don't do that, LinkedIn will automatically order your skills based off of the highest volume of endorsements. So the higher something is, as in like the more people who endorse you for something, then it shows up at the top. So for example, data analysis is not my 3rd most endorsed skill, but I wanted to show a little bit more range to some of my skills. My 3rd showed up, I think, as communication. And to me, I felt like communication and public speaking told a really similar story from a skill set standpoint. And so that's why I dragged data analysis to show higher, just to provide different experience. The other thing that LinkedIn's going to do is, you'll see here, they're going to think that endorsements by colleagues of mine tend to carry a little bit more weight. And so that's why you'll see kind of the endorsements by colleague and where that colleague works. And then before we just proceed, Morgan, great question here. Yeah, board work experience, put that in volunteer. Absolutely. I had my time on the UVA board in the volunteer experience. Okay, getting close to the end of profile. Underneath skills, you get some of those recommendations and endorsements you were talking about earlier. So think of this as, you want like your biggest fans to be writing great things about you. So you're only going to ask for endorsements, right, or recommendations from people who know you and who can really speak to your work. What's great about this, you get a preview, of course, before you choose to make them public. And again, you can request these. So I would think about that really close work colleague who the two of you have a great relationship with. You want them to talk about a project that you've worked on. You can reach out to people who maybe were former interns or that you've worked with in that capacity. This is, again, a nice to have section, but it just allows other people to speak, again, to a wide range of recruiters and employers about you and their perspective working with you. Not necessary, but I think it just visually adds a lot to your profiles. And then before we wrap up profile section, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about privacy and security, because it is so, so important. And I just want to make sure you feel in control about the privacy settings that you put on LinkedIn. So when we talked about editing your page, you would click on that me icon in that top right corner on LinkedIn. And if you click on that again, you should see at the bottom of the drop down an option for settings and privacy. And this is where I'd probably spend time after the session versus right now, just looking at those preferences that you've set. Here's where you can think about the language that you see your LinkedIn displayed in. You can think about how many notifications you get. Sometimes people are like, why do I get an email for every connection request? Well, and it's probably in here. And so you can use this to minimize the amount of notifications you get. You can also use this if you want your email address to be shared or not shared. You can also change the email address, right, associated with your account, anything like that. I would spend some time in those privacy settings afterwards, because I just think it's always important for us to know, what information is visible or out there, or how do we take some more agency over the notifications that we might be getting. So we're about to wrap up profile to go into all of the networking and then the job seeking piece, but I see two more questions. So for endorsements listed non-chronologically, great question. I actually haven't looked into that. You probably could reorder them, but I can look at that one after. And then for a PhD, does that belong in work experience or education? Also a good question. I would probably start with it in or I'd probably have it in both, but I think education to me stands the most out. The reason I said you could have it in both is there might be specific either like articles or bodies of work that you've published based off of your PhD, or there might be work experience, like as a research assistant you held during your PhD, that could also be work experience. So to me, it could be in both. I think at a minimum, it should be in education. And then based if you had some sort of research or, graduate assistant position, something like that, that might also show up in the work experience. Really, really good question. Okay, so on to building our network. So let's move just one slide forward, because this is where, again, all of the kind of the power of LinkedIn really comes from. So you first put yourself out there on LinkedIn, right? You put your who you are, your story, your LinkedIn profile, and you start to connect with people. And we mentioned what first, second, and third degree connections were, and we'll go with that in a moment. But the reason that connections matter and having a network is important, and so your network is just made up of all of your connections, is because the data tells us often people get hired based off of having a connection. And there's a beauty to this, right? And that LinkedIn can really democratize kind of access to new networks that you might not have had a connection through. But there's also a challenge in this, which means if I don't have a network that reflects the types of jobs or the types of industries I want to go into, well, the data tells me it's going to be really hard to break into those jobs or those industries. And so on the best of days, think of LinkedIn as a really great enabler for you to build a network that reflects the types of jobs, the types of industries that you want to get into. So if we scroll forward, I just want to reiterate kind of the who's in your network. So first degree connections, that's everyone that sent you a connection request, or that you've sent to, or that you've received a connection request. And if you hit accept, they become part of your first degree network. And so Hongwoo and I might be first degree connections because we've worked together, but you also should connect with people who you've gone to school with. Yes, you can and should connect with your family members or your neighbors. Sometimes those questions come up. While LinkedIn is not meant to be like the new Facebook by any means, you want it to be relevant to the professional network, you should connect with people that you know. But second degree connections, if we click one more, this is often where that power of networking lies. And so this is who all my first degree knows. And LinkedIn is going to prioritize showing you content or an experience when you first log on to LinkedIn that is made up of posts from your first and second degree network. And so that's why you don't want to necessarily accept everyone into your first degree network that you might not know, because it might really dilute the quality of your feed experience if you start to see posts from people where you're like, I couldn't tell you who that is or how we ever got connected. Because the more you do that, just the more diluted your experience is, and the harder it is for LinkedIn to know what's relevant for you. And so first degree, people you connect with; second degree, people that those folks are connected to. And then if we click once more, that is the third degree network. And that's everyone that your second degree network knows. And this makes up your professional network on LinkedIn. And so if you want to build that network, right, if you want to start connecting with people who you want to invite into your network and see the types of things they're posting about or the things that their connections are posting or talking about, when you're searching for someone, so in this case, the visual has Anne, and Anne is a second degree connection. You can hit to connect with them. And I always recommend personalizing a connection request. It takes 5 more seconds to just write a few words to tell Anne why you want to connect with them. In this case, the example is like, we met earlier at a conference, want to keep in touch. If I've not met someone before, I might personalize it by saying, I see we share blank in common. I'm hoping to connect for blank reason, right? Or it could be, oh, that's a second degree connection that Hongwoo knows. Instead of me just sending them a note, I might first say, Hongwoo, can you tell me how you know Anne? And would you be open to an introduction, right? That's another way that you could have a conversation and then invite Anne into your network. But I cannot underestimate how important personalizing invitations are. I think it's just more generous. And I think it can be overwhelming sometimes when you see connection requests and you don't always know how to remember how to relate to that person. This is so helpful because it will then live in your messaging tab, and you'll be able to see the context, right, of how you connected, where you met, why you connected, things like that. And I will come to any of the connection requests or connection questions in just about one more slide. So who do you connect with on LinkedIn, right? You want to connect with people you share things in common with, people you might want to hire, or people that you may want to hire you, people you want to learn from, or people you think you could have a really interesting, professionally relevant conversation with. And kind of the format I would structure my reach out with is, who are you, how you found them, and how do you think either they could help you or you could have, again, some kind of mutually beneficial conversation. So it could be, hey, Chris, I saw you on this University of Virginia call. I came across your profile. I noticed you worked at this place. I've always been curious about that. Can we have a 5-minute conversation, or can you tell me about that? So after this conversation, like some of us might have even found people here, right, that we want to connect with or learn more from. And I would just always say personalizing it goes a long way. So before the jobs, let's see, okay, I think Ted had posted on if there's people you want to connect with and you're a second degree. Yeah, so some people might choose to not have connections like based on their privacy settings. They might make it where you can only connect with them either if you know their email or if they want to connect with you. Because some people on LinkedIn in their own privacy settings might say like, I don't want more connection requests. I'm okay with follow, which allows you to see the content that they post, but it wouldn't then have them seeing the content that you post. And that might be because they're just trying to put certain privacy settings or certain kind of, guardrails up on the amount of content that they see. I usually find that that the follow only is on if someone has a lot of connections. They might not want to just have a super massive network. In that case, I would actually either see, do you have an introduction? So like a first degree connection that could reach out on your behalf, or you can always send a message without having to connect with someone. And messages are where you would probably use what's called an in-mail credit to send a message to someone, you should get a certain amount of free in-mail credits, and then you get more credits if you pay for a premium subscription. But when you use that message and you personalize that message, if they respond back to you, then you, one, get the credit back, and two, there should then be a way for you to be able to connect with each other after. Yeah, or in some cases, exactly, it could be that there's under more, where you can select to connect. It just might not be the button that first shows up, and that's because they've gone into their privacy settings and they've made some changes there. Really good question. And then for some of us too, just before we talk about searching for jobs, like if some of us are just getting back into the workforce, right? Let's say we've taken some breaks in time, or we've perhaps had like our own self-employed gigs. Those are super value to add and to talk about. And I think there are two different examples. So let's say you've taken some time away from work, whether it is starting a family, which clearly on my brain right now. Think about LinkedIn as a place to tell that, right? And where I would do that is actually in my summary section. It's a really great way for you to personalize who you are. And many of us can relate to taking breaks, right? And I think LinkedIn is that way for you to just share a little bit more vulnerably than maybe where it can be hard to fill those gaps in on a resume. Think about LinkedIn as a way where you can do that in the summary section, if or as you're comfortable posting, and we can talk about content soon on LinkedIn, or even in your headline, right? It could be like recent, took some kind of a recent career break, looking to get back into blank industry or blank type of jobs. I would use that headline to be really direct with what you're looking for, and I would reiterate that in your summary section. Really good, just kind of questions or dialogue that might be happening around that. If there's freelance or self-employed things you've done, put that in your work experience, right? It is just as valuable to document that as it is for work experience that might be at larger or different companies. You still want to put that experience out there. And if some of you maybe have personal websites too, of like some of the services that you've offered, you can add that as a hyperlink in your about section where people could read more. Great questions. Okay, our power 15 minutes, the job part of LinkedIn. So right, we talked about like, how do I build a profile? Who do I connect with and why do I connect with them? And then what do I do on LinkedIn? Specifically, how do I find jobs? So that's what we're going to focus on right now. And so what I first encourage you focus on the next slide is you want to set some job interests. And so, and a couple things, when you click on the jobs tab, so this should be on the top in between network and messaging, you're going to see a lot on this tab. So on the left-hand side, I'll just walk us through kind of what exists here. You see things like My Jobs. Those would be jobs that you've saved and that you either want to apply for or that you did direct apply to from LinkedIn. That's going to show up in My Jobs. Job alerts are where you can actually set notifications where anytime a job is posted, perhaps from a specific company in a specific location or with specific keywords, you will get a notification to your email that says, hey, Diane, we see this type of job posted and it just posted. You want those notifications the sooner that you can get them, because the faster you apply to a job being posted, the higher likelihood that a recruiter will actually be able to get to your resume and application. I can't guarantee you hear back from them, but I can tell you that the sooner you apply from when a job goes live, the more likely that a recruiter will actually get to seeing your application, because there can just be such a high volume. Those are two big things. The other one I wanted to share is actually the interview prep. This tab is, I think, a place many of us don't know about, but there are sample interview questions and videos of how people answer interview questions on LinkedIn. And this could be things, again, like the tell me about yourself question that I think are just really great, right? To practice ourselves or to watch people practicing. It's all LinkedIn video format that you'd probably be able to see here, or you could even get like LinkedIn transcripts of just some sample interview prep and interview questions. So those are a couple of things you can do on the left-hand side. In the center, you're going to see here how LinkedIn starts to recommend job searches for me. And so LinkedIn is doing this at the top because they're taking keywords in my profile, right? Keywords that are going to be from the job title that I hold, or a lot of the just language I use in my profile. So I talk a lot about talent in my profile. I talk a lot about learning and development. So it's going to pull things like talent development, organizational development, talent management. And so if I click onto that, it'll just start showing me job searches that match what LinkedIn thinks matters to me based on my profile. And then you can, again, set job alerts for roles like that. And I'd spend some time here because if you see what LinkedIn suggests as a job search for you doesn't really match the jobs that you want to have, well, that might signal to you that there's something in your profile that you might want to think about some different keywords to use, because LinkedIn, again, is using its relevancy based off of what you've written about yourself in your profile before. And that's how kind of these job searches would get recommended. And then I see right below specific jobs that are recommended for me. And so these jobs are going to show here. They'll share, where they're based. I have a premium insights to see how many people have applied to them. I can save the job. I can click on it and direct apply to it. I love that I can also see who are my connections at that company. And so even if I'm not reaching out for a direct referral, I will still always reach out to people in that company just to get some tips from them, right? Tell me about what is your experience like? What was your interview like? If you're not comfortable going for a full referral, which some of us might not be, hopefully you still feel empowered to use your connections in a way just to ask about what life at that company is like for them or any tips that they might have for you. All right, so let's push one more forward. Some of us might have real great companies in mind that we really want to work with. And an important tip that, again, some of us might not know, you want to follow companies that interest you. And why do you want to follow their page? Well, you'll see here, recruiters on LinkedIn actually would be able to see, based off of a candidate that's applied for a job, do they follow my company page? And if they do, it's just going to show much more of a seriousness, right? That you really care, in this case, about Starbucks. And it's just a super, super easy step. If there's brands that you love and companies you want to work with, following their page allows recruiters to know that you're taking their company much more seriously. And it also allows you to get a lot of access to what life at that company would be like. Right, so under the Life tab on this left-hand side, you're going to see videos about what the employee experience is like. You're going to see jobs in specific locations. It's just a really great way to interact with the brand and know what it might be like to work there. But super, super small and simple tip, because it is so much greater for a recruiter to know Hongwoo follows my company, and then I'm probably more likely to want to engage with Hongwoo versus someone who doesn't. Okay. And our final 10 minutes, I know this is a power session, but I want to make sure I've got some time for any other random questions that'll come up from what we've discussed. I also want to talk about how you can post and engage on LinkedIn, because I think this can also be a great way either to connect with new people or even to get great access to jobs without even applying for the job, because people see, oh, you talked about this. My company's hiring someone who has a specialty there. Would you be open to a conversation? So here's what you do on LinkedIn. Yes, you're going to search for jobs. Yes, you're going to invest in building connections with people. You're going to probably like, post, and share content. You're going to join groups, and you're going to give recommendations to others. But let's talk much more about the content. So that's the next page here. You want to be you when you're on LinkedIn. That's kind of the headline here. So whenever you're posting, whether you're starting a conversation or you're commenting on a conversation that you see on LinkedIn, you want to sound like yourself. So be you, try to get into a habit of posting frequently. And again, that posting could be you actually starting a conversation on LinkedIn, or it could be you just commenting to people. But the more that you post, not only do you get more comfortable just putting your voice out there, but again, LinkedIn's going to know you're more active on LinkedIn. It's going to help LinkedIn build a lot more better relevancy on the content that it shows to you, the articles they think you care about, based off of the actions you take, right, when you post or when you comment. And so if there's some sort of a goal you can make, I think once a month is a really achievable one. Some of us might want to go for like a once a week or more like that, whatever feels right to you. But just getting into a habit of posting is really important. When you're starting conversations, you want to have some kind of a relevant hook, right? So is it that you've read something in the news recently and that you think you and your network would want to talk about and just ask for people's opinions on? Or is it that a company, again, that you love or care about had some sort of announcement and you want to respond to it, like a new product launch has come out and you're curious, is anyone else, trying this? Like, tell me about your experience. Just think about professionally interesting conversations you want to have. Some of us might also want to use LinkedIn to build more of our own thought leadership. So for example, in my job, when it comes to working with a lot of students, and in the last couple of years, it's been reevaluating how do companies hire, how do we run internships virtually, things like that. I might write longer articles about how to build a really great virtual internship experience, or articles about how to onboard at a company completely virtually. That might be a longer conversation than me doing a post and saying, hey, what are your best virtual onboarding tips? Both are relevant. They just serve two different purposes. So if I ask in a post, tell me your best virtual onboarding tips, it creates a really great conversation. I perhaps get some really interesting insights that I might want to put in an article. And a longer form article just allows me to put more content out there and start to, again, build a little bit of a brand or reputation for what I love to talk about. And so articles, you want to think about 500 or more words. Again, sound like you, have some kind of a point of view. And here's where you should have a little fun with that headline. The same way I want you to have fun with that headline that represents you, I want you to have fun with that headline about the article, and make sure that there's some kind of a hook or something there. I can tell you some really cool stories about people who write articles and then they get job opportunities, right? Or they get opportunities for speaking engagements at companies. And those speaking engagements could either create access to new networks, they could create paid opportunities. So if you've got a point of view and something you want to share, please use LinkedIn as a way to do it. Really cool opportunities can come from it. Woo! All right. I promised 5 minutes for questions at the end. I hope I didn't speak too fast. I hope the content felt like it was at the right level. But let's see if there's any more questions coming in or if anyone did want to come on off mute. And I appreciate, Christina, that was awesome. It's always lovely and it helps me feel good too. So thank you. Okay, so vague questions. So how much do norms vary between the US and other countries? Really, really good question. So yeah, there's not going to be one like right answer here, right? Or one great answer, because it's probably going to depend too on the other country that you're thinking about. I guess what I would say is like all of my tips are probably just LinkedIn specific today. And you're right, they probably skew a little bit more to like a LinkedIn English speaking and US experience. But for all my colleagues at LinkedIn who work in a wide range of countries, I still see most of us talk in the first person. So that's one tip that I think can just kind of help. And the reason being is it just humanizes your profile versus sounding too robotic. I do think pictures and media continue to be really important. I recognize there might be some differences in perhaps like the attire that I might want to wear for certain countries or certain locations. But I think the tips around talk like yourself, writing in the first person, a lot of that hopefully holds true. And any of those tips that had the insight sign, like your summary has to be 40 words, that holds true for any geography or any market that I might be in. Your headline usually is about 5 to 10 words. And I guess those would be like a couple of the big ones that I would say. But if there's something more specific too, you're welcome to write to me on LinkedIn. Anyone here is welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. Just know I'm much more likely to respond quickly with a personal connection and like a, hey, we met during this briefly. I had a question on this and I wanted to go deeper. I'm happy to talk there as well. All right, got some tips, some appreciation. Okay, quick tips for people looking for a career change. I think that's one I see here. Sorry, just wanting to stay up with the chat. So if you're actively looking for a career change, I think first my question to you is, are you open about sharing that? Because the more open you are about sharing that, the greater the opportunity you can have that change, right? And so things to do, like on your LinkedIn profile, you can change around your picture for it to say like actively looking for a job, just like other people could have a purple ring around their profile that says actively hiring. So depending how open you are about your career change, if you're on the I'm open and I'm ready, I would publish that on LinkedIn. I would make that clear in a banner around your picture. I would make that clear in your summary section, like looking for new jobs in blank or looking to get into X industry. Please connect with me. Again, you can choose to share your email if you want, or just encourage people to post to connect with you through LinkedIn Mail is another option. Let's say that you're less open. When you're setting your job interests, there's ways that you can actually set an open to feature on your jobs. And it can say the types of jobs you're open to. There's a drop down that says, are you actively looking? Are you casually looking? Or are you passively looking? And the good news is when you set those open to career interests, nothing visibly happens to your profile while doing that. So like your public profile doesn't change when I set that. But as a recruiter, I'll be able to see that you're open to when you apply for jobs or when I'm searching for you for jobs. The only downside or question that sometimes comes up here is like, well, would a recruiter at my company know? And I wouldn't stress too much about that. One, two, I really haven't heard of like many downside or scary stories to that. But that's like a more private way to talk about your job search is you can set open to and change career interests. And you can share that in a way that doesn't have like a public profile announcement. But if you are in the place of wanting to be really vocal about it, I think it's important to share more versus share less on LinkedIn. LinkedIn really has been such an active community, especially through recent layoff newses across just so many industries. It's really powerful to see when people share the opportunities and the conversation that is happening. I see a couple of things on premium. I'll just try to summarize one or two more questions as we wrap up. I mean, I worked at LinkedIn, so I of course love LinkedIn, and I'm going to say premium rocks, but I'm also going to say premium rocks if you have a purpose for it. So if you are actively job seeking, I think premium does give you better insights, right? You're just going to have more access to more information. Or let's say you're looking to skill up in ways that LinkedIn Learning could offer for you, because LinkedIn Learning is a platform where you can actually take technical or non-technical virtual classes. If you don't have access today to some of those virtual classes or virtual content, you could explore that with premium as well. There's probably a lot of free content out there too. So my headline is, I think premium is great, but you want to have a purpose. If you don't yet know what that purpose is, I might not choose to invest in premium. But again, I love LinkedIn. All money to LinkedIn matters. Anything else? I just want to see if there's one or two more kind of consistent questions before we wrap up. Oh yeah, I can put my LinkedIn profile link in the chat. And then I'll end with this one from Julian on like applying to jobs, like how to differentiate yourself, right? Or would you recommend messaging recruiters? So I do think like ways to just differentiate yourself. First, you want to sound like you versus sound like anyone else, right? So I think if you're taking some of those tips away of like, how do I make my profile feel personal to me versus trying to copy and paste what you see somewhere else, I think that's one tip I'd always recommend. On your application, I would recommend the resume that you apply with, trying to match the job you're applying for as much as possible. And that's why I mentioned LinkedIn is going to be a broad, dynamic way for you to talk to multiple companies at multiple times. Your resume, you want to tailor for the specific job that you're applying for. So when you're putting a resume out there, I would look at that resume and I would look at the job description kind of side by side. And I would see, okay, is my resume really setting me up for this recruiter to see similar skills that make sense for the job that I'm applying for? So that would be one thing I would do. I see sometimes too few people personalize or customize a resume for the job. And it just, those extra 10, 15 minutes can really matter and make your resume stand out as the most relevant for that job. But I'll stop. I know we're at time and it's a Friday. just a huge, huge thank you to everybody. I really appreciate the conversation. I appreciate the chat. I appreciate some of the kind words. I'll put my LinkedIn profile in here too. And I just ask if you want to connect, please personalize that connection request, because it will help me just have that same connection back to you. And I'll stop there before Hongwoo talks about more beer.
Thank you, Arin. So with that said, I appreciate everyone dialing in for this event, and we recorded the event, and we will publish the recording to all of our alumni. And February the 22nd is our next event. If you are in the Seattle area, we look forward to seeing you in person. So thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day and have a nice weekend.